Today we're going to talk about how to never get a kidney stone. Then we're going to roll into 20 scientifically proven tips to never get a kidney stone. Now the question you might say is, what do I know about a kidney stone? What makes me an expert? Well, I had one. It was the most painful thing of my life. It was a rude awakening of a severe abdominal deep pain that felt like someone literally took a knife and stabbed me into the kidneys. I couldn't get any relief. I was like, honey, wake up. You got to take me to the emergency room. I am dying. And she's like, can it wait till morning? I'm like, no, drive me now. So we go to the emergency room. They put me on morphine, put a catheter in. It was a nightmare, and I've never experienced that much pain in my life. Then 2 weeks later, I'm jogging. I come home. I have to use the bathroom. When I am urinating, I am literally peeing blood out. I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Apparently that kidney stone had sharp edges and it was just tearing up and cutting up my kidney. Now, if you're at risk for a kidney stone or you had a kidney stone, you're going to be super glad that you watched this video. Because when you do a search online or watch all these videos, it's going to give you all of these solutions. It's going to tell you all these theories. But the question is, what is that one thing that is the most important thing to focus on? If you understand what that is, everything else will make sense. And I wish I would have known this when I had a kidney stone. I didn't even learn this until just a few weeks ago. So this is going to be super relevant information. Okay, most kidney stones are calcium oxalate stones. So it's a combination of calcium with the oxalate, and it builds up in the kidney. Now, sometimes there's a uric acid stone. Sometimes there's a stone made out of phosphorus. But it doesn't matter because the solution is going to be the same thing. It's going to be this thing right here. So when you do research on a kidney stone, they might talk about citrates or citric acid, like lemon juice, because that will help dissolve the calcium part. But you also have to realize that your body makes citrates. And a lot of people that have kidney stones go to the doctor, they do a urine test, and they find low citrates because your body apparently is not making them for some reason. We're going to explain why. Now, the next thing you'll hear is you have to drink a lot of fluids, like 2.5 liters of fluid a day. And why is that? Because if you're dehydrated, then what happens is you get this super concentrated calcium oxalate and then it forms a stone. But if you can keep the urine diluted enough, then you potentially won't ever develop this stone. So that's another thing that they recommend. And yes, that's important. But there's certain people that drink a lot of fluid that still get stones, okay? So it's important, but it's not the most important thing to focus on. Then we get number 3, oxalates. These are things in foods that can build up in the body and create arthritis. They can form with calcium to turn into a kidney stone. So they not only come from certain food, your body can make them as well. Now, most people had the microbe maybe when they were a kid, but then they got an antibiotic that killed that microbe that actually eats oxalates. So a lot of people no longer have that microbe to help eat oxalates, and that could be one of the reasons why they have higher levels of oxalates in the body. But the foods that are high in oxalates would be almonds, almond flour, spinach for sure, chocolate, kiwi, beets, Swiss chard, and other nuts and beans. So if you go to a kidney specialist that deals with kidney stones, they'll have a little brochure and they'll say, avoid foods high in oxalates. Number 4, vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 helps keep the calcium out of the soft tissues, out of the joints, out of the arteries. And there is some data that shows that it may help prevent calcium from accumulating in the kidney and other tissues, but there's not a lot of data. And they don't really know if it's specifically going to help remove calcium from the kidney, but there is a little bit of data that talks about vitamin K2 keeping the calcium in the bone and in the teeth. There's also information on your pH of your urine, that if your urine is too acid, that can create more of a tendency to get a stone too. So people will tell you to alkalize the urine to reduce the risk of certain stones, especially like the uric acid stones. One way they do it is with citrates, lemon juice, things like that. But then we get to this topic of vitamin D, which makes things extremely interesting because really the only toxic effect of vitamin D when you take large amounts is kidney stones. So what's going on with that? Is it the high vitamin D that's causing kidney stones in the general population? Well, when you understand what this is, this will make a lot of sense. This particular thing has a super strong binding capacity for oxalates. In other words, it will combine to oxalates way more than calcium will bind to oxalates. And then when this does connect to oxalates, it doesn't really form a stone. Let me give you another powerful clue. It's a cofactor for vitamin D. That means it's a helper. It's an essential thing that allows vitamin D to work. And if that particular thing is deficient in your body, vitamin D is not going to work that well. So you might absorb calcium in the intestines and into the blood, but that's where it stops. It doesn't then go that next step into the bone or the teeth. So then it builds up in the blood and it trickles off into the kidney. And this is the perfect storm for a kidney stone, all because you're deficient in this thing right here. And this also explains when someone has a large amount of vitamin D and they don't take this thing right here, which I'm going to explain shortly, what happens is they get a massive buildup of calcium that only goes halfway. It never ends up in the bone or the teeth. And on top of that, this controls calcium inside your cells. There is a lot of different health conditions that involve calcium building up inside the energy factory, the mitochondria, different cells that end up causing damage to the cells, and that leads to heart attacks and things like that. There's even medications that are called calcium channel blockers to help lower blood pressure. This thing is a natural calcium channel blocker, okay? Not just with kidney stones, but for a lot of other issues. All right, the next thing is phosphorus. I'm not going to get too into the woods with phosphorus, but all you need to know is there is a certain type of phosphorus stone that can develop. Well, guess what? If you have enough of this thing right here, you will not develop a stone out of phosphorus. And then the next thing is if you have enough of this, you also will increase your citrates in your urine. The very thing that keeps this calcium dissolved and prevents the connection with oxalates. This particular thing also increases the pH, makes it more alkaline to prevent a uric acid stone. It's also antispasmodic. Now, think about this. When I got the kidney stone, it was like there was a Charlie horse in my kidney. I wish I had this, which is the antidote to anything going in a spasm. And it also has an anti-crystallization effect. So in other words, it prevents the stone from developing sharp edges. It slows the formation of a stone. It makes the stone slippery enough so it doesn't have Velcro on it and it doesn't get stuck in your kidneys. It helps to decrease the parathyroid hormone. All you need to know is if your parathyroid hormone is high, then that means that it's going after your calcium from your bone and taking it out and putting it into your blood, making things worse. Well, guess what? This thing lowers that. It works in conjunction with vitamin D to help regulate calcium and keep the calcium going in the bone and not in the kidney. And this is magnesium. Magnesium. Interesting. Magnesium is hands down the most important thing to focus on to avoid kidney stones. And if you have a kidney stone, you should be focusing on magnesium. Now we're going to get into what to do to never have kidney stones. You can also use this if you have a kidney stone to help you dissolve the kidney stone, but we're going to talk about 20 scientifically proven tips. Number one, magnesium glycinate, 300 to 400 milligrams a day. Now, if you're getting enough magnesium from your diet, you don't need to do this unless you know you're at risk for a kidney stone. Maybe your parents had it or there's some genetic predisposition. But the glycinate part, which is glycine connected to magnesium, is really good for sleeping, but it's also good to increase glutathione, which is an antioxidant that can actually help your kidneys. So this is why I recommend magnesium glycinate with lemon water, okay, on a regular basis. So the combination of these two together are going to be really good. And you can even get this in a dissolvable powder form as well. Now, one thing you might want to think about with lemon water is just put it in mineral water. Why? Because mineral water is a good source of magnesium. So that could be very helpful. Number three, leafy greens. The chlorophyll, the green stuff in leafy greens, has a root of magnesium. Avocados are high in magnesium. Pumpkin seeds have a good amount of magnesium. But a lot of times when you're looking at your foods and calculating how much magnesium you're getting, it's not as much as you might think. You might have to increase it to create a therapeutic dosage. Number 5, should you lower your oxalates in food? Yes, they're in spinach, almonds, almond flour, chocolate. But what's interesting, these other foods, these things right here, spinach, almonds, and chocolate, are also super high in magnesium. And magnesium will bind with the oxalates. It's almost like nature has provided the antidote to the poison or the toxin. I'm not 100% convinced that you're going to get a kidney stone from spinach, almonds, or chocolate because it's high in the antidote. But just to be sure, maybe you do want to lower them. All right, number 6, I did mention phosphorus. Phosphorus is something we need in normal healthy food. You're going to be fine. But when you start to have junk food, especially colas, you're going to get a lot of phosphoric acid. That artificial type of phosphorus is not good for your kidneys. It's not good to help you avoid a stone. It can create all sorts of problems, not just with kidney stones, but other issues. So for that reason, I would just avoid junk food and cola, right? Number 7, if you ever take vitamin D, also take magnesium. Or if you buy a vitamin D supplement, make sure it just has magnesium in it. As long as you have enough of the cofactors, magnesium, vitamin K2, zinc, it is going to help protect you against this calcium overload in the body. All right, number 8, avoid calcium carbonate. Literally on all of the big brand multivitamin minerals, the first ingredient is this limestone calcium carbonate. You don't want to load up your body with a lot of calcium. It potentially could trigger a kidney stone. This is why I recommend getting your calcium from food like cheese or dairy, but not from rocks or limestone, especially not as the first ingredient in these supplements. Number 9, drink 2.5 liters of fluid per day. Okay, I do recommend you do that, but make sure it's not soft water. Okay, if you have a water softener, they're taking out the minerals. Hard water is calcium and magnesium. So the risk for kidney stones decrease when you drink hard water, like well water or spring water. But regardless of what type of water you drink, if you keep your liquids 2.5 liters, it's very unlikely you're going to develop a stone, especially if you're doing all these other things. And number 10, potassium foods are important. The foods that are high in magnesium are also high in potassium, so you should be okay on that. But potassium is an alkalizer. It will help prevent the formation of the uric acid stone, but it also helps you retain citrates. So it's another benefit from having enough potassium. 11, diabetics are at high risk for kidney stones, and having the body too far one way or another can create a problem with different stones. But you do want to lower your carbs if you want to decrease your risk of getting a stone. Diabetics type 2 usually are very severely magnesium deficient, and even having a lot of sugar in your body, whether it's coming from the diet or another way, is going to increase the demand for magnesium and even deplete magnesium and other nutrients. All right, number 12, fermented foods. That may help you reseed the gut microbiome with that microbe that can help eat oxalates, potentially. But there is some interesting research on consuming fermented foods or probiotics and decreasing your risk for kidney stones. And number 13, avoid high fructose corn syrup. You just want to avoid all junk food because that can increase your risk for uric acid stones. Number 14 is decreasing alcohol. Alcohol also puts a lot of stress on the kidney and the liver, creating a potential for getting a stone. And then number 15, make sure you have enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, because as we get older, we lose the stomach acid. And that means we can't absorb minerals like we used to, like magnesium. So how do you know if you have low stomach acid? Typically, you're going to have indigestion, gas, a lot of bloating, maybe acid reflux or GERD. The solution is something called betaine hydrochloride to acidify the stomach, and that will not just solve those symptoms, but help you absorb more nutrients like magnesium. The more chronic stress that you're under, the more magnesium you are going to be deficient in. So in other words, if you live a really stressful life, you need a lot more than this too, especially if you have problems sleeping. Number 17, the more sweating you do, maybe you exercise or you just sweat a lot, that can also cause a magnesium deficiency just from the sweat loss. And this also means if you do a lot of jacuzzis or sauna, you will lose more magnesium in that process. And then if you overtrain, if you do a lot of heavy lifting or a lot of exercise or marathons, in order to make energy, you need magnesium to make this thing called ATP. So the demand for magnesium is super high for an athlete, or especially if someone's overtraining. You need more magnesium to run those little motors. And then there's also medications that deplete magnesium. Diuretics are a big one, antibiotics, steroids, birth control pills. And the last thing on the list is fluoride. Fluoride in your water can deplete magnesium. Now that you understand more about kidney stones, if you really want to know what magnesium does in the body, watch this video right here. Check it out.